I Don't Know Yet is not affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. The content put forth are the thoughts, opinions, and experiences of the host and guests. It is meant to be suggestive only and is in no way a reflection on how to work the steps in any fellowship or how to work any other recovery program. Okay, welcome back to I Don't Know Yet. Today is going to be a really exciting conversation. In preparation for starting to record, one of the biggest things that I was worried about was that I wouldn't even make the intro without crying, and I already feel it coming, so I'm just going to lean into it. Today we are going to be talking about sponsorship and a lot of the things that come with sponsoring, being sponsored, and a lot of questions that I wish I knew, things like that. And so in preparation of trying to figure out who I wanted on the show for this, what a better person than the person that sponsored me for 3 years. And I freaking love you. And I wouldn't be where I am without you. So
I love you too.
So excited that you're here. Welcome, Alisha.
Thanks, Jen.
Oh
Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy that we finally connected to do this. As you grow in recovery, life starts to get pretty busy. So
it does. Yeah, we were going to do this a little bit ago until that stuff came up with my dad. And then,
yeah. But it all aligned.
Yep.
God brought us together. So Here we go. So I guess it's just going to be kind of a whatever comes to mind conversation and kind of just go from there. So in the spirit of talking all about sponsorship, maybe we should start with how did you find your first sponsor? What were you told? What did you look for?
Yeah, so I remember going to a meeting and being told from my treatment center that I needed to get a sponsor. And they're like, yeah, sponsor somebody who's done the 12 steps. Just find someone, grab them, and do the steps. So I met this one lady at a meeting, and I didn't know that I didn't know that you should find someone who maybe has something that you want or a solution or somebody that resonates with you. I was just like, oh, you just pick one. It's like you go to the grocery store and grab an apple, And I was like,
easy,
right? So I remember going and meeting up with this woman at a Starbucks, and in my addiction, I did a lot of fraud. And this lady's like, yeah, so I'm the head of the department for the government for fraud. And I was like, don't know if I'm going to be super honest with you. And then she ended up giving me this giant workbook, and I was like, is this what sponsoring is about? It was honestly, even to this day, 6 years into my recovery, I've never seen a workbook like what she gave me. It was really big, and I was like, so am I supposed to sponsor myself? And she's like, oh, just go through it and let me know. I'll be back from Mexico in a couple months. And I was like, huh. And I was like, that's really weird. So I didn't go through with her being my sponsor.
Right.
I went to a different fellowship, and that's where it was a speaker meeting, and I heard this lady sharing her story. And from this point, I'd had a little bit more understanding of going to meetings, and you want to find people that something resonates with you. And I heard this lady share her story, and I was like, wow, this lady was just as messed up as I was. And I'm like, she's here sharing a solution and a story, and she expressed how important it was to find somebody who had a conscious contact with their higher power, who is living in the principles of the program, and to find somebody who you related to that you felt you could be honest with. And I was like, okay, I'm going to ask this lady to be my sponsor. And I'm super grateful for that woman, because without going through that first set of steps, I wouldn't have been here today. Mm-hmm. And that first sponsor showed me how to have integrity, how to be responsible, how to be accountable, for me to take constructive criticism, for me to be called out on my shit. But over recovery, over the past 6 years, I've had a handful of different sponsors. I find different times in my recovery, I've needed different things. And sometimes you might kind of plateau with someone. Sometimes you need something else. Sometimes you need a different perspective. It doesn't mean that sponsor is ineffective. It just, maybe you're just at a different point.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I remember, with the court mandated program that I was in, they were extremely adamant. You're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that includes getting a sponsor and all that stuff. So I actually heard a lady speak. I don't ever really refer to her as my first sponsor. I hold that place in my heart for you, but she was technically, I guess, a temporary sponsor, which I also don't care for that verbiage either. But
me neither. I don't believe in that.
You're either going through the book with somebody or you're not. Yeah. But that's a whole whatever verbiage works for you, I guess. And I remember being in detox And I listened to her speak, and so at this point I was already like hearing it and being told like find someone who has what you want. And what I found fascinating about this woman is that I did not relate to her at all. I didn't. Like I was more leaning to the addict side. She was definitely just an alcoholic. And the experiences were just wildly different. But for some reason, I was drawn in listening to her speak. There was just some energy about her. And that's what attracted me. And that was like, okay, well, the way you present yourself, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And so I asked her and I remember being so terrified to ask anyone for anything back then. Like I burst into tears and I was just like, will you help me?
Right? I know.
And she was just like, petted me. She's like, it's fine. Here's my number. Here you go. And then I went into treatment and, you know, she ended up taking me to like my very first sober function. It was a Galentine's Day sober Valentine's kind of deal. Had a great time. And then COVID hit and then I got out of treatment. The world was closed and I met up with her for like 3 or 4 times. And she was great. She asked me how I was. We talked about things. She was very into helping me with early recovery type stuff. And then I kept going to meetings and everyone's like talking about reading the book and doing the steps with their sponsor. And I'm like, I haven't done any of that. Like we've never opened the book. And then I was like, okay, this might not be the right fit. So then I started seeking other people. I'm like, how did you choose a sponsor? And, you know, what did you look for? And it was very just, I think I was very lucky because I think that there's a very fine line in what to look for and what not to look for. And I hear a lot of people being like, well, I'm waiting to find the perfect person. And I'm like you're not welcome to addiction. You're never going to find the
right?
perfect
We're
person.
All fallible.
Right. But it was very just find someone who has something that you're looking for that you feel that you might have some chemistry with and can be honest with. We're like just like the biggest things. And then it was interesting because I remember being in that group and then having you stroll in. You are a very original looking person. So it was very easy to be like, I recognize her, right? I'm not normally good with faces, but I'm like, I recognize her. And I listened to you speak and it reminded me of watching you take your 1 year when I was at this meeting. And I don't remember a lot of actually approaching you. Like I don't. I just remember asking you to meet me. And then you said, okay, let's have a first appointment. I don't really remember. It's weird that I can remember all the fine details of asking her because I was so terrified. I don't know. You just seemed really approachable. And yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed. I don't know if this is a thing that everyone does. For the most part, what I hear is people meet for a first appointment. Let's have a 10-minute chat and see if we might be a good fit. And, you know, I remember meeting you and I don't remember anything about that conversation except 2 things that were like stick out in my head. It was if for any reason we are no longer a good fit for any reason, just let me know. I'm here to help you as long as I am supposed to. Easy peasy. And I only sponsor women who sponsor other women. So I need to know if you have the desire to do that. And I'm pretty confident in saying that I lied through my teeth. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no problem. Like, sure. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking I'm never going to get through the steps. Like, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But then it did. So I think what would be really beneficial is to talk about some of the struggles that come with being a sponsor, mistakes we've made along the way, and just kind of letting people know that it's okay to fuck these things up. Because I think that there's this like magical pedestal that exists in the world of recovery that people just throw their sponsors up onto. I did it with you. Right? But we all make that mistake. We see this person. It's like, they're better than me. They're doing well. They're perfect. They're amazing. I can go to them for anything and they're just going to always nail it out of the park every single time. And that's just not really the case.
Yeah.
So tell me about your first experience, like taking on your first sponsee. What was that like?
I'm like thinking back. Okay, so my first sponsee, I was so excited. This woman, I met her at a meeting and it was a little bit different of a situation to sponsor because she was also a little bit illiterate.
Okay.
So for me, I was told, okay, like you got to read the big book, you got to do these things. And like, so when it when it came time to doing her step 4 or 5, I actually had to write it out for her while she talked, and like, so we navigated through it. It was interesting. I would say sponsoring, and I always tell people sponsoring has taught me the most about boundaries than any like personal work. That's why I honestly I'm known to have like pretty strong boundaries, and like it's come from sponsoring hundreds of women and men. Yeah, I've learned so many different things. Like, I find like because there's less women who sponsor, there's like already a less amount of women in a room, like in a meeting, as opposed to men. And then there's less women who sponsor other women. So that pool for sponsorship, it's smaller, right? And then I found myself at one point sponsoring a majority of people sitting in a meeting. And like, I found it very, very hard to keep everything separate and wear so many hats. And like, because like one person's talking to me about a situation about the other person, but they're both my sponsees, and I'm hearing to, and like, you know, to stay out of it and to be mindful and principles before personalities. And like, and then like, as you are sponsoring people become your friends. You become, you develop like a different type of relationship. I find like a lot of times different than most friendships that people have had, because it's actually based on like, you know, being honest and being vulnerable. And a lot of us haven't experienced that. And yeah, that can be, I mean, I think it has benefits, but there's many times in the past like 6 years where like I've blurred those lines. Like I'm a human, I'm fallible. Like, you know, I've definitely messed that up at times. Now I'm very mindful about that. I don't sponsor a bunch of people in the same friend group. You know, if I'm able to. Now I have really strong boundaries. I'm like, do you want me to talk to you as your friend, or do you want me to show up as your sponsor? How can I be there for you? So now I have better ways to navigate through things instead of, you know, trying to play both things at once, because that doesn't work out the best.
It's exhausting.
It's hard.
It is exhausting. I remember my first few sponsees, and what I love about sponsorship, for anybody who does not understand or know that like why it's so vital. Number one, my first set of steps, like I maybe was paying attention 60% of the time. Like if I'm being totally honest, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
as
steps,
most of us are in the beginning.
You're reading a chapter and I'm reading along and my brain is off thinking about something else, right? But you get through and then you learn about, like, I think it took me 3 years to actually start doing 10s, right? You have every intention, but then you don't, and then 11s and all these other things. And so sponsorship really strengthened my steps, because every time I took somebody through, I'm like, how am I supposed to ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do? And so I was, you know, being more disciplined, and I was going through all these things. But what I found, especially, like, I didn't realize how glaring some of my deepest rooted defects and the unawareness that I lived in them until sponsorship. It was crazy. And I can't even remember her name. She only made it to 3 or 4, but I remember vividly because it stuck out so much in my mind. And I did it to myself, and I'm pretty sure that you actually helped me see that. But I wanted to help people. I'm like, okay, I think I have the knowledge to do at least something. I got to get out there. I got to go do it. Okay, cool. And then I found this person, and then I'm like, do you want to ride to a meeting? Like, just
remember this.
Come on board. Like, let's go to a meeting. And so I was very much trying to stay on top of her recovery, on top of her work, trying to walk her through the door herself. And so I was like, and I was all over it, just like give. And then all of a sudden, she just like called me randomly like an hour before, and she's like, hey, I need a meeting. Come get me. And I was immediately annoyed. And I was just like, this bitch just thinks I'm just going to drop everything. And like, who does she think she, and I called you, and you're like, well, yeah, you taught her that that's how the relationship was going to go. Because you wanted so badly her validation and for her to work with you that you just people please the shit out of everything. Mm-hmm. And that was a very, very light, like that was a catalyst in my understanding, like how deep that kind of stuff went. And I was just like, holy, I remember that was something that was really, really important. One of the biggest things that I remember what street I was on. I remember exactly where I was when you and I had a conversation. And it's one of the things that I was very angry in the heat of the moment with you about. But of all of the conversations we've had and all the work that we've done together over the years, this is like the number one thing that I remember about you. And it was because in your experience, as you've just said, was learning how to set boundaries. And so I don't remember where I was, if I was already through the steps or in the middle. I don't remember. But I remember I didn't reach out as often as I should. And you were pushing me to be like, you got to reach out more. Like, stop struggling. Stop making it harder for yourself. Just when you need something, reach out. And then I needed something. And I reached out and I called you and you didn't answer. And then it was about 7 or 8 hours later and you hadn't called me back. So I called you and you answered and you're like, hey, and I just gave you attitude immediately. And I was like, I needed you. Where were you? And I was pissed and thought that I had every right to be, because again, defects. And I remember the tone in your voice and you're like, wow, we clearly need to have a conversation. And then I was immediately wait, hold on. I'm yelling at you. What's happening? And you're like, okay, in case I wasn't clear, and you did it so directly and so with love that I couldn't receive it in any other way. I remember all of it. You were just like, okay, in case I wasn't clear before, let me be. Your recovery is yours. And your job is to reach out when you need help. I'm trying to help you get to that point. It is not my job to drop my entire life to assist you when you need something. I was unavailable because I, too, have a life and I'm in recovery and I'm doing stuff. Did you call anyone else? No. Okay, why not? I was like, oh, God. And you're like, your job is to have pillars and things. As a sponsor, I'm not your God. I'm not your Superman. I can only help you when I'm available. And I was like, oh, that was just such a big moment. That experience with you really helped me set boundaries for people in the future. And I really appreciated that. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember your tone coming through the phone. Okay, we apparently need to have a conversation.
I was like, oh, she reached out. That's a great start. Yeah, I find like that happens quite a bit. Like over the years, I've had people reach out to me, ask me to sponsor them. They're like, can you go take me to look at these places? Can you pick me up and do this? I'm like, you know what? My boundaries are, if I'm like earlier recovery when I wasn't in school and I wasn't doing much, if I can afford and I have the time to afford and the gas money, whatever, I don't mind picking you up and taking you to a meeting. But I'm very clear that like, if you get to a meeting, I'll drive you back, or like I'll try and work with people, but I try not to,
do it all for you.
Just cater to people. Yeah. And like, a sponsor is somebody who's essentially done the 12 steps and who's had a spiritual awakening. We're not a chauffeur. We're not somebody to loan money. We're not here to help you with all these other things, find an apartment, whatever. Somebody wants to help you of their own volition. Like, that's great. Mm-hmm. But being a sponsor is taking someone through the 12 steps and helping them like resort back to their higher power and how to effectively do inventory. Like, that's all a sponsor is. Like, and I like that you said, like, sometimes people put people on pedestals. Like, I always like to tell people, I'm no better, no worse. I just found the solution before you did. And you found the solution before other people did. And like, it's, yeah.
And I think that that's a really big stigma that like I really want to smash home to anybody that's listening. Like, I went through this phase where like I got like, there was fear in the beginning because I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything. And you were very supportive. You're like, are you obsessing over drugs and alcohol? I'm like, no. You're like, cool, then you know enough to go help someone. Like, it's very simple. So there was a lot of fear there. I didn't think I knew anything, but once you do it enough times and you get enough practice, right? I went through that little bit of an ego thing where I'm like, I'm a great sponsor. Look at all the things that I know about sponsoring. Don't you want to be sponsored by me? I know stuff. And God did not let that sit for very long before he crushed that entire feeling. Because as soon as I thought that I knew what I was doing, then I ran into a bunch of problems. And so what I've noticed over the last year or so that has been a struggle that it wasn't before is I enter into every relationship with a new sponsee and I tell them, I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, I really, like, I know very little. I don't know a lot, but I know enough that I don't use and drink every day anymore. And that's a great start. And I tell people that maybe it's a boundary that I need to work on. Maybe I need to be more vocal about it. But I have found over the last year, I can think of like 4 or 5 people that even though I tell them I don't know everything, it very quickly transitions into them totally forgetting that conversation and thinking that I should know everything and thinking that I should be able to answer the phone. Like it's weird. You set these expectations and a lot of times people really, really need to be reminded But I do think it's interesting. And I remember you teaching me this as well, talking about, do you need me as a friend or do you need me? I used to do that. And I used to think that I used to find it very effective. I've actually stepped away from that, which works for me. And it took a lot to get there. I know you and I have had a couple hard conversations, but there's one person in particular in my mind that was really the deciding factor on moving away from that. I refuse to, in a sponsor-sponsee relationship, I refuse to be someone's, like, if a friendship blossoms, great. I refuse to be your friend. Do not call me if you want me just to be like, yeah, you're totally right, they suck, right? We had a conversation about that earlier, right? Because we're friends. But when it comes to a sponsee, I find that line for me and my experiences with people has been blurred so much, where then they just want to continue to come to me without me offering any kind of solution to it. And I don't want to be someone that gets called 4 times a week for 3 months with the same problem, because you're not actually looking for a sponsor to help you.
You're looking for a cosigner.
You're looking for a cosigner. You're looking for someone to take your side, and then to be like, what is the number one thing that we're told from our sponsors? This is your fault. You made this mess. You need to work on you. Like, this is the premise of the steps, is figuring out that we are the cause of a lot of our own failure. And it's really, really frustrating when a sponsee loses sight of the fact that my job is to tell you what you need to change, and then in turn say that I have absolutely no sympathy for somebody, right? Like,
I do agree. Like, it's so when I ask people, like, do you need me to listen, or do you want my feedback? Do you right? Like, so it's sometimes with different people, I do it differently. And I always tell people, like, you can't sponsor everybody the same way. Like, and I feel like that's what makes me an effective sponsor, is like, some people need to be taught a little bit different of a way, or like, I always try and ask people what they need, but some people, I find it's more effective to ask people, like, are you trying to vent? Like, and I'll only listen to some types of things, and I'll wrap it up and be like, okay, let's get to, let's direct this back to the program. What's your part in this? What are you looking for? Like, and if you're and then I'll just say, like, so you're just calling me to bitch about this? Like, what is this? Because I am your sponsor. So then I wrap it back around to that, right?
That.
So it really depends on the person.
And that's something that I think really you can't even really teach that. Like, it just comes from experience and meeting different personalities
100%.
and different people. Like,
it's like, I feel like it's like being able to read people, or like, having experience.
I also so that actually just sparked something in me over the last year or so that I've been starting to do. And I find it super effective, as I ask people, like, how do you learn? How do you want to be taught? How do you want to be sponsored? Tell me what you respond positively to. And so, because women are naturally a little more sensitive, I ask people and I say, do I need to soften the blow for you before I offer you something? I need to understand, because I want to love you, not your feelings, and I want to be direct. But a lot of women seem to have oh God, why are you being so mean to me?
Yeah.
Right?
Like taking it personal
and thinking that I'm trying to attack you, right? So that I've had actually quite a few people that say, like, yes, I would prefer a soft start. So then I'll say, okay, you realize that I'm only telling you this because I do care about you, and that without telling you this, you won't grow through it. They're like, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm going to say something that you're not going to want to hear right now. I ease them in. And then I'm like, this is all your fault. But yeah, it takes a lot of practice. And like, I remember one of the biggest growth lessons for me, and I think that this is really important to talk about, is when to let someone go. Being let go as a sponsor is one thing, but knowing when the relationship has run its course or it's just not a good fit. I remember the first time that this was a real problem, and it took me 8 or 10 months to go through this process. And I set expectations. She didn't meet them, and I bent. And then I would set boundaries and then not hold them, and then I bent. And then it was back and forth and back and forth. And so I essentially enabled this relationship, but I didn't see that at the time. And then I went through all of this stuff. And then I dropped her, and then she came back. She's okay. Now I'm willing. And then everything happened again. And it was very like, I would be like, this has to happen or I'm not doing this. And it never did. But I kept giving in and the people pleasing and the holding on. And maybe if I just do it this way, maybe if I try to control just a little bit more, maybe then it'll work out. And it ended up blowing up badly. I also pussied out 100%. I didn't even have the courage to not only go face to face or even talk on the phone. I sent her a novel of a text backing out of everything. And quite quickly, I got a response of, okay. And then I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then the next day, I received 4 novels back with all of the reasons why.
I recall that.
Yeah. And I remember talking to you about it. And I remember talking to the guy that sponsors me right now. And I remember calling him after I had chatted with you. And I remember just being like, I just destroyed this woman's life. Like I just wrecked her and I don't even know what to do. I feel really guilty. And what he said just stuck out so much in my head. And he said, it's interesting that you think you're that powerful. And I was like, ooh, okay. I needed to hear that. And he was like, don't you see? This all came together for you both to learn this. And I was like, what? No. And he was like, yeah, like that's literally how it works. Now your job is to be aware and not to do those things in the future. And I was like, okay. And so I've really, really learned on that. But I've noticed, even though I'm aware of it now, sometimes it's really hard to let someone go. Like, cause you want, like, I want you so badly to be well. Do you have experiences like that where it's like really sucked or, just advice to anyone who needs to let a relationship go?
So I would say, like, when I think back to letting sponsees go, I don't know. I have a no shit policy. Like, if it's not working out, I set like a 3-time boundary. Like if, we're going to meet up and you don't meet up and there's no excuses, my time's valuable, I could be helping someone else. It's really easy for me to let it go. That's one area that the defects so much haven't come up. I think because I was just, when I was sponsored, I was really taught that like your time, like because there's less women, you need to be really mindful about the woman that you're helping, that they're going to be helping other people. And if people are going to waste your fucking time, move on to somebody else who can. I found like sometimes it can be hard to let a sponsor go, right? Like, and I think like for anybody, like there could be fear of like, are we not going to be friends or something like that? But luckily, like for me, I was always told like, and like I told you when I first started sponsoring you, like just let me know. Like it doesn't mean anything bad if you let me go, but it's a part of us like growing through like our character defects of avoiding things and confrontation, and also seeing that relationship, just because a relationship changes in its like the way it presents itself doesn't mean that relationship has to change. Or like sometimes it's even better, like now we're really good friends and we can still talk about program stuff. It doesn't mean that anything's ever like changed in that capacity, right? But like there's some people like so I recently just got a new sponsor, and like the woman who was taking me through the book before, her book before, I was like, oh, like I don't really want to let her go, like what if it's taken personally? And I had that little thought come up, and then like I had to quickly remind myself, I'm like, it's not about that. It's if this person is working their program and God-centered, they're going to want what's best for me. And right now I need something else. And I need to find somebody who could teach me that something else right now. And that just happened to be another woman. Yeah. I've also let sponsees go. Like there's one sponsee. It kind of reminded me a little bit of what you said about like holding people on a pedestal. Like there was a sponsee, she held me a bit on a pedestal. And like there was a point in my life like a couple years ago or a year ago where I was acting in defects in some different areas. And she's like, well, I think like you should be doing better and different things. And we kind of like fell apart in some ways. And then actually not too long ago, she made an amend to me. And then she explained how she like helped put me on a pedestal, and but now she realizes that like I'm just another addict. And actually she ended up asking me if I would continue on the steps with her. So I started sponsoring her again, and now we have like we've talked about all of our boundaries. We're really good with that. And like that's one of the really cool things about the program is if both people are working and trying to be aware, like you can come together or go apart or like different things like that. And like back in the day before ever learning the 12 steps or the program, like that wouldn't have happened.
100%. Well, and it's interesting because, like, I remember that conversation that you had with me, and I remember you were very clear, and we worked very closely together for years. I knew you as a person. I loved you as a person. And the sheer terror that I had in my freaking body to call you, because, like, somewhere inside, I thought I was letting you down.
No, you never let me down.
I love you.
I love you too.
But it's just like, yeah, it's just like one of those things. And it's probably more the defects within myself than anything. But I called and I started to cry. And then you were like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know how to say this. You're like, just say it. And then I'm like, I think that maybe. And then you're like, sure. Yeah. Are we still friends? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, then we're good.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was interesting too. Because I remember the first time that I felt that way, and it was like I had called and reached out to a pillar for help, and I'm just like, I feel like I need to level up, and I feel like I'm stagnant right now,
Plateaued,
and I don't know what to do, and I didn't. It never occurred to me because you and I just always worked so well together, and so it was pointed out to me. They're just like, well, when was the last time you changed sponsors or went through the book again or got guidance from someone with different life experience? And I'm like, wait, what?
Right.
They were like, you've been with her for a really long time. You learned a ton. Maybe everything that she had to teach you, God has given you all that. You know, other people have other life experiences that can also help you along the way. And I was like, I didn't even consider that. Like, it didn't even. And what a beautiful experience it is to work with multiple people, right? Because
100%.
People have different strengths. People have different weaknesses, different defects. Like, it was just really cool for me, what I found. And I remember thinking about this before coming here today. And a part of my brain was like, maybe I shouldn't bring this up. Because a part of my brain wants to people please and and say only things that make people happy and want to watch the show and want to agree with everything we say. The other part of me is like, I want to be my authentic self. And if I say something you don't like, but I stand by it and believe in it,
do it.
Fuck you.
Do it.
So I think that it should be talked about. And I think that there are exceptions because the amount of stigma that I have heard from the fact that I chose a male sponsor is, in my opinion, fucking appalling.
Oh, I went through that myself.
I know.
And I
thought
also
you'd be a great
sponsor
person.
men too. So
I sponsored
I'm like,
a man as well.
right. So
yeah. And I think it's something that's worth talking about. Like, for me, you helped me learn how to set boundaries. You set boundaries with me. I learned a lot from you. And I used to be one of the people that wanted the soft start. Tell me you love me before you tell me how much I fucked it up. Right? But now I understand that being co-signed and living in, like, it's not helpful. Cut me down. Tell me what to fix. I want to fix it. I want to grow through. I want to get better. Just tell me. And I have found men seem to be a lot more direct. They don't care about your feelings at all. And so that's one of the things that I started doing about, I guess, 2 years ago, is the majority of the time when I had a problem that I wanted solved right away, I was reaching out to a dude because he'd be like, well, you fucked up here, go fix this. And I'm like, what? Okay, all right, sweet. And so that was something that was really helpful. And so when I ended up calling my current sponsor to be like, how do you feel about this? And he was like, well, why don't you explore other options? And I'm like, oh God. And then he suggested someone. And then so I went, and I've had him on the show a couple of times. So then I went to chat with him and I'm like, would you sponsor me? I'm already going to you for everything men's related right now anyway. And he was like, sure. And then that was really great. And I had a really great experience, learned a lot. And then he moved away. But then I was already calling my current sponsor constantly for relationship advice. So after everything kind of fell together, I'm like, bro, like, can we just work together? Like this just, it makes sense. And, we both entered into relationships almost at the same time. And he had a lot more experience in certain areas. And it's just really, really worked out. I remember the first time a man asked me to sponsor them, I came to you and I said, I've never had someone ask me before. And I can't remember if you said this to me or someone else said, I feel like it was you. But it was, if men didn't sponsor women, there would be no women in the program.
Yeah,
right?
Said that,
because it was 97 men and 4 women. Out of those first 4 women that helped write the book.
And that's exactly
Get sober.
And that's what I was always told. Like, I remember when I asked my my previous sponsor, who's a male, to be my sponsor, like, I asked him straight up because I appreciate how direct he is and how straight to the point. And like, that's what I need. And like, for me, even now, like my new sponsor that I have, I'm like, tell me exactly how it is. Like, it's like, cut all the bullshit. Like, I'm a very straight up person, so I appreciate that better. Like, the kind of slow, kind of soft start, it kind of doesn't really vibe with me so much. And like, I usually tell people, like, if you're very sensitive, I'm probably not the sponsor for you.
Right.
I'm like, probably not. I don't want to offend people, or like sometimes people do take it very personally if you say things. But yeah, I like,
quick sidebar, you literally just said something that I never even considered being able to say to people. Thank you for that. I'm gonna
What's
start
that?
saying, if you're sensitive, I'm not for you. I'd rather just be direct.
yeah,
I
like,
love that.
yeah, like there's like, you know, if people are going through different times in their life, you can be like empathetic, but
Right.
you know, like naturally I'm a straight up person.
Yeah.
Before I used to people please
Yeah.
and be like,
And coddle.
yeah, and
Oh,
coddle.
poor baby.
But you know, my old sponsor, the male sponsor that I was just telling you about, he's like, care more about their fucking lives than their feelings. And that stuck with me. And I say that all the time. I'll say that to my friends. I'll say it, and I'll be like, I say this with love, but to be honest, like, I care more about your life than your feelings. And like, this is fucking dumb.
Right.
Like,
sounds easy. But then we went out for dinner last month and I was still terrified. But that's my own stuff. That has nothing to do with you. You've proven time and time again that you can be someone I can talk to. But same thing. Hey, with love, I've noticed this. I'm concerned. I'd like to talk about it.
right?
And then you talked about it and I was like, okay, I'm no longer concerned. Thanks for the talk. Like,
It's easy to build things up in our head though, right?
God, we're so bad for that. So bad for that. So I guess something that could be beneficial as well, not just from the sponsor perspective, what would you have to offer from your experience, listeners, of when a sponsee should let the sponsor go? Like, not like us letting them go. When should, if a sponsee is working with someone and they're not sure, when's a good time for them to be like, maybe this isn't a good fit? Have you ever had a sponsor or a sponsee talk to you about anything like that before?
Like about like letting me go?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been let go lots. Like whether it's like somebody like gets to a different part in their recovery, letting me go, or if like, or like for somebody else, like if their sponsor doesn't align with their values, because like we're all people and we're fallible. Someone might be living in that fourth dimension, fifth dimension and doing really well, but maybe life happens and maybe they start to, you know, stop doing their inventory, stop praying, stop working with other people. They start to recede backwards through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe like, so for myself, that was like kind of something that's why I just let the recent person that I was working with go, because they were going through a lot of different things. And I found like I wasn't getting spiritual advice. I wasn't getting a solution. I found myself reaching out to other people. And I'm like, if I'm not feeling like this person can direct me to what I'm needing, which is my higher power, then I need to find somebody who can, and who, you know, at different times in the life, like, you know, now I'm going through a lot of business stuff. I'm going through a lot of different things in my life that I wasn't going through 6 years ago because I was fucking homeless and lived in a tent. So now I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So I've always told you, if I don't know what to do in the program, I find somebody else who does. If I want a healthy relationship, I find someone who has a healthy relationship and ask them for help. If I don't know how to do step 10, I find someone who has step 10 down packed and I ask them for help. So I found a woman sponsor who is a strong woman. She's a leader. She, you know, she's ambitious and she's very straight to the point. And I'm like, I fucking need that in my life.
Yeah. I love that. Sponsorship. Oh, man.
What would you say? What would you say would be something that you would suggest to somebody as a good time to like consider letting someone go?
I agree with like everything that you said. I think that for me, like just keeping it literally as simple as getting one. Why do you choose a sponsor? Because you want what they have. If you stop wanting what they have, then it's probably not a good fit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what that means.
Yep.
Right? In all different aspects. But I think that also too, like I've just seen, well, not see, I've heard and seen in all the rooms that I've been in, a lot of people that hold on to things a lot longer than they should, out of most likely things like fear and, you know, disappointing people and all that stuff. But I've heard of people that, you know, I remember one meeting, it's a meeting you used to go to all the time. I feel like it was on a birthday of mine. And I listened, like one of the topics was sponsorship or something. And I just listened to like 3 or 4 people be like, well, I've been sober for over a year. I finished the steps a while ago. I haven't started sponsoring yet. And I was just like, oh, oh my God. And then so I'm just like you are literally missing out. And I listened to people talk about, waiting for the perfect person or just trying to. I've had people come to me and be like, I don't think that I know enough about the steps to do it. I need to do all these things. And I'm just like, just find somebody that has what you want and just do it. Right? Stop waiting for the perfect person because they don't exist.
It's kind of like in the big book where it talks about like step 5 and there's that line like, if you need to hold off on this to find the right, like, as a fucking excuse, like maybe back in the day when there wasn't hundreds of meetings and people to like, like you can find anyone to go through the book.
Yeah.
And like, I think another thing that's important to like express to like people that might be listening is like to be a sponsor, like you said, you don't have to know everything. You just have to have been through the 12 steps and have had a spiritual awakening. We are not God. We cannot affect someone's life. I don't know, like I do have opinions about like people who are maybe like not a real deal alcoholic addict sponsoring. I do feel like that is where the program gets misconstrued in like sponsorship. And I was just talking about that the other day with a friend because like, like this person and I, we were going for a car ride and like, he was telling me about like he just got his first sponsee and I was like, that's great. And he's like, do you think I could pick your brain about sponsorship? And I was like, for sure. We're driving out to the mountains. I'm like, go for it. I was like, okay, so what have you done for your step work? And he's like, oh, well, like we read like 5 pages of this and whatever. I did the treatment center steps before. I'm like, how are you going to take someone through the big book if you have not been through the big book? Yeah. We cannot teach something to someone that we haven't been taught ourselves. And I'm like, and that's where the program gets fucked up. It's not that us as people can fuck people up, but I think like when the message gets diluted and it's opinions or bullshit like that, that gets fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, really, really agree with that. And like I remember the first time that I called you when someone called me and said, hey, I need to do a treatment center 5. And I'm like, how does that, like this person gave me this letter from the center asking me to do this thing. And thank God you had previous experience because what you said was do it, but immediately after tell them that they need to go through the book again when they're out. Because this is not the same thing.
Well, it's not the program from the big book, right? Yeah. And like that's where, and then like I find like a lot of treatment centers with sponsorship too, like they do like, one fellowship's like 10, 11 different than the big book. And then people are coming into, rooms and fellowships and then things are getting diluted and people are really confused and they're like, well, I thought this step meant this. And, it's like, and that's why it's important for me, like, to like, find a sponsor who's been through the big book as somebody else took them through it from beginning to end and like follow that. Like I always tell people, like, as long as you go through the big book, the way that I was taught, the way that somebody else taught me, like the results are up to God. It's not up to us, right? Like we can sprinkle our recovery on anybody, but we don't know what the fuck's going to happen. And we don't know what that person's path is. Maybe we sprouted the seed. Maybe we didn't. Maybe the person realized the program isn't for them, but like we did our job. We showed up. Right?
Well, and ultimately sponsorship is a part of the steps that keep us sober, right? There were many failures, but there was the occasional heartening success, right? Like sponsorship is vital to our permanent recovery. And, as sad as I do get when something with the sponsee doesn't work out the way that I wished that it would, like I do take solace in the fact that even though it was hard going through those feelings, it kept me sober. It 100% kept me sober.
100%. And like back in the day, like people are like, oh, like meeting makers make it.
No, they don't.
And like, and I'm like,
maybe not big book addict alcoholic meeting makers,
right? Like maybe if you're a heavy or a moderate, but I find, what was I gonna say? I just forgot.
Meeting makers make it.
Yeah, like so back in the day, like a long time ago, you would see somebody go to a meeting, they would pick up a sponsee, and that sponsor and sponsee wouldn't be seen at the meeting until they came back. They're done the 12 steps. They would come back. They would get somebody for the sponsee to sponsor, and then they would do a 2-on-1. It wasn't about going to fucking meetings. It wasn't about all the fellowship. Like, yeah, that stuff is nice, but like the real work is sponsoring. And like throughout the 6 years, like I've been through a lot of shit during the past 6 years. There's times where I've went to a lot of meetings. There's times where I went to less. But no matter what, I've always sponsored.
Yeah.
I've always stuck with helping people. And like, that's the thing that gets me through it, because I'm actually helping someone else and they're actually helping me.
Yeah.
Sometimes in meetings, like, you know, messages get diluted. There's lots of fucking opinions depending, you know, how, you know, because every meeting is autonomous in their own way. Like, depending how they're, you know, where are you at? I don't fucking, like, you know, there's a place and a time, but like.
But I mean, even with the best meetings, I think people sometimes forget, like, even the best meetings that give you energy, give you hope, give you this feeling of connection and fellowship, that's not permanent. That is for that hour. The permanence comes from the
Doing
one-on-one work and doing all the work. And that's just, like, it's just so important.
It is. So it is. And like, when I look at like my friends, like, who I went to treatment with, or like that I came into recovery with 6 years ago, the people who are not doing well spiritually and emotionally are the people who refuse to fucking sponsor.
Yeah.
And especially honestly, I just see it so much with women. And then there's like women, like, you know, there's a point where like yourself and myself, we're each sponsoring like shit tons of women. And it's like, you know, like there should be other people, and they're really just depriving themselves of the benefits that come from that, right? The benefits for themselves and like to the feeling, and like that's when the whole program comes together. Like you said, like you can go through the book and hear it from someone else, but when you're sitting there reading it with somebody and expressing like how you worked through it and what worked for you and like your experiences, there's nothing else. And like, where else in life do you get to take the shit that you've been through and you get to possibly help someone else maybe not make the same choice or maybe not fall as hard on their face? Like, many people don't get that opportunity to take the shit they've been through and help someone else.
Right. Well, and it's funny that you say that, because that is something about you that I love that you taught me that I haven't thought about in a while. So thanks. I remember I must have been maybe 6 months, maybe a year sober. And you would offer me guidance and be like, my intuition, higher power, like in my experience, this is what I would offer you for this conversation. And then I would hang up the phone and be like, ooh, that sounds like work. That sounds uncomfortable. That sounds scary. I'm not going to do that. And then I would do the opposite of that. And then it would get progressively worse. And then weeks later, I would want to call you, but again, I was so afraid of disappointing you that I waited until I almost couldn't stand it anymore. And then I would call you and be like, remember that thing you told me to do? I didn't do it, and now everything has exploded.
Snowballed.
And all I can think that you're going to say is, well, why didn't you take the advice that I gave you? Why didn't you listen to me? That's all and you were that was probably one of the things you talked about in our first appointment was there is no judgment. My job is to share my experience. I'm not here to tell you what to do. And I'm never gonna try to tell you what to do, because if it goes wrong, I don't want to be accountable for that shit, right? But then when I called you and I'm like, I can't take it anymore, I remember it was one of those fucking huge moments for me, because you were like, oh man, I messed this up like 6 times. So hold on, are we on the first or the second? Okay, here's what I did next. Like, it was very, you're not the first person to not take advice. Like, we don't like the easier, softer way. Like, it's okay. It is absolutely okay. And being able to have somebody who doesn't have judgment and has that love and empathy.
No holier than thou.
Yeah.
So important.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I always tell people too, like when I sit down and I'm like potentially working with someone new, I tell people like, you lying or being dishonest or not being forthcoming or transparent, like that's not going to affect me. And I'm not going to take that shit personal. It's just going to affect you in your recovery, and it's going to affect my ability to be able to help guide you back to your higher power or the inventory to help you see your part if you don't want to be honest. Right?
Yeah.
And like usually people are like, what, really? Like, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't care. It's just going to affect you. And people are like, huh? But it's true.
Water off a duck's back for me.
Yep.
Yep. I love that. I think something that just came to my mind, I'm kind of shift a little bit. But I think that this is really important, because I just had a sponsee recently get through 12. And when I'm like, fly, little birdie, congratulations. She was terrified. And it was so sweet. And it's so cool to see how we progress through life, right? Because I was just like, "Aw, you're scared? That's adorable. Like, it's easy." But I remember being so scared, right? And so it's something that I'd really like to offer to anyone listening that, again, you helped me with a ton. And I offer it to all my sponsees because you offered it to me, and some take it and some don't, and that's fine. Water off a duck's back for me. But one of the biggest things that I found the most helpful, I've seen some people's big books, there's nothing in them. And I've seen some people's big books where there's nothing but yellow highlighting. And I'm like, I don't even know how you see anything in that. I personally really like the colors because it separates things. But the amount of notes that you and I took together, I didn't understand the importance of them until the end, because then you're like, here you go, fly birdie, go sponsor. And I'm like, but I don't know how. And you're like, sure you do. You have the experience. The notes are in the book. Go read it with someone. It's actually quite simple. And then I'm like, but what if I don't know something? Because there's a lot of old language in this book. You're never going to get it all the first time. I'm like, what do I do? Then you said, I have two options that you can do that I use myself. You can Google it, or you can call me. If you don't know something, don't pretend to know it. Don't bullshit your way through
100%.
it. Right? That also, if you're trying to act like someone who knows everything, why are you surprised when people put you on a pedestal? Like, don't pretend to be someone that you're not if you don't know. And so I ended up, at one point, I thought I should just create a folder, like a do-a-tang. And like, here you go to all my, I've thought about it. Maybe I should be like, here's what I go through on meeting one. Here's what I go through on this. Like, here's like all these things, like which chapters to read and when, and like all these things. Here's words that have nobody knows what they mean in the big book unless you look them up. Like just these like little things. But I've always told people, I'm like, any sponsee, they're like, what do I do? I'm like, you sit down and you're going to read this chapter and this chapter. You're like, this is what you're going to start with. Read the notes from the side. When it says in the notes, talk about your experience, ask about theirs. Like, it's very dumbed down with all of the notes that we have. And if you don't know something, look it up or call me.
100%. And like another option, like that I always say is like if somebody's really nervous, I'll be like, we can do a 2-on-1. Right. And like, if you're worried, like you take the lead. I just sit there. If you have a question, if your sponsee is comfortable, if you're worried about doing a step 4 or 5, like we can sit down together. Like I'll walk you through the same way my sponsor did. And like, if that gives you some peace of mind, then after that, then, all I hope is like, if you have another sponsee who needs that help, you do the same thing and you just pass it on. And a lot of people, that takes a lot of the fear away too. They're like, I'm not going to have to do it completely on my own the first time.
Yeah, I haven't done it like enough. It was interesting, actually. My sponsor, I had said, I'm like, hey, I've never actually gone through the book with anyone else but Alisha. Like, I keep hearing that it's good. Maybe I should like do that again. And I actually really loved his response, and I'm still waiting for God to align that. Maybe I should look a little harder. But he said, if I'm being totally honest, I think that would not be as effective. And I'm like, as what? And he said, why don't we find someone to give the miracle to together? And in doing so, you could also learn how I do it. And I was like, damn, that's real beautiful.
I love that, honestly, because like some of the times so I had this one sponsor, and we were working with one of my sponsees, and like, we did a couple steps together. And like my sponsee at the time was like, wow, that was great to get both your ladies' perspective. And she's like, and then I also learned, and then we like piggybacked off each other, and it was just like flowing real well. Like, like when you go to some book studies and the people like have they piggyback off each other real well. And it's like, it's really great. So like even one year, I went through my step 5 with 2 people separately at separate times. And then one year I went through it with 2 people at once. And I found like going through my step 5 with a couple different people gave me more feedback and more things to think about because they each had different perspectives.
Like a tripod?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My sponsor told me they did that for an inventory and it was super effective.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you don't want to miss shit.
Well,
4 eyes.
And it's interesting because they also showed me, he was shown by someone. And so like it's been presented to me and it looks really interesting. I haven't, the specific resentment that I had in my mind for it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. how overlooked the third column can be in breaking that down. And
that's my favorite column.
And so this is like goes into detail for the highs and lows of each of those items. And I was like, this looks so cool. We should totally do it. So now there's going to have to be like 4 of us that get together that all do it together. So I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah,
But-
I found, and it's like through having different sponsors that was pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
The male sponsor I had, like, he was always a pillar in early recovery, and he's like, pay attention, Alisha, to the third column in your inventory. And like now it's like I can say, like, maybe through things that are going on in my life right now, like my security, that one, so important to be mindful of. You can find so many things but I wouldn't have learned that if I stuck with the one sponsor.
Right. Yeah. Always good to get other people's perspectives. But yeah, it was just funny because I remember hearing so many people sharing in the rooms talking about time to do another set of steps, time to do another set of steps, time to do another set of steps. And a part of me was actually offended by it because I'm like, but if you're working the steps, then you're never finished them. So what do you need to do another set for? Like I didn't understand. Right. And then when I got to that point, I'm like, oh, that actually might be super beneficial. Right. Because you have to remember, like, you could only teach me what you were taught.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows if that was even right? We're all human. We're all people. Like, who knows, right? So in approaching my sponsor and asking for his help and having him like immediately be like, I don't think that's a good idea. I was like, oh, and he's like, but here's why. Because I think that it would be a much more effective use of our time to do that together. And I was like, oh, it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I find, like, I remember when I asked the one gentleman that sponsored me to be my sponsor, and I went to him and I was like, I don't know what's happening. Like, he wasn't my sponsor at the time. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I'm doing all the work. I'm sponsoring. I'm doing all the service stuff and like whatever. And I was like, maybe I need to do another set of steps. And he's like, Alisha, you don't need to keep fucking doing sets of steps. He's like, maybe you need to do another inventory because you need to keep your house clean. But he's like, you don't need to keep going through the whole steps. Like, there's different books. So then we actually, once he sponsored me, we actually went through a different set of 12 steps. That was helpful. So like, I won't re-go through the big book to do a set of steps. I'll redo an inventory from the big book, but then I just add on to my steps. So I'm not really doing another set of steps.
Yeah.
I'm just adding to the step work I already have and maybe doing more inventory.
Yeah.
And then the new sponsor I have, she has a different way of going through, like a woman's way through the 12 steps. And I was like, you know what? I've never tried it. I've done all these other books. So I'm like, let's give it a go. I'm like, so technically, in a way, I guess that one will be kind of be like doing a new set of steps because it's through a different book. But
so this is called A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps?
Yep.
Fascinating. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, like I remember when I was in a treatment center, that's what they gave everybody. And like we actually kind of talked a bit about it, but I didn't really give it much look. But yeah, that book was pretty good. And then the other book that I did was Violent Voices, 12 Steps to Freedom from Mental and Emotional Abuse. And
yeah, you told me that you really benefited from going through that.
That one, like once the drug and alcohol obsession left and I was looking for something deeper for the emotional sobriety, that's where that book really helped me work through a lot of the things that I was struggling with that I couldn't figure out what I was missing. And it just helped me use the 12 steps to dig deeper. Right. And like, that was really good. And that's also a benefit of like working with other sponsors because other sponsors have other tools in their tool belt, right?
Yeah, totally. I love that. I didn't know there were so many options up there for 12 step work.
Right?
I'm learning stuff. Something that just came to mind that I think I should mention. This is like the tough part. And like, I know, like, you know, it's easy to say water off a duck's back, thick skin, but there are things that in my experience that have affected me. And I think that for anybody who could be watching or listening and is trying to learn about this stuff, I think that it is beneficial to set the expectation that sometimes the ending of relationships with sponsees can go sour. And how to deal with that stuff, because as an addict with the people pleasing and the validation and I just want you to love me and accept me and I don't want to disappoint you, all these things can be incredibly hard. I'm sure you've had experience. I can't think of anything that you've told me off the top of my head, so I'll share one of mine and then I'd love to hear one of yours. Okay. Oh gosh. And you know, a part of me, like, I really searched to be like, where did I go wrong? What should I have done differently? What do I need to do differently in the future? And the one thing that I did out of the ordinary with this person, and it could have contributed, which is why, should it ever come down where I can contact this person, I will offer them an amends. But I took them through faster than I'd taken anyone else. I met them twice a week instead of once a week or once every 2 weeks. And it was for like 2 to 3 hours per session as opposed to an hour and a half per session. Like, she was adamant that she wanted to learn. And it did that contribute? I don't know. Maybe. But she really wanted to dig in. She wasn't working. She had nothing but time. She wanted to do the work. And I was just like, if you're gung-ho, I'm gung-ho with you. Let's do it. And we did 4 and 5. And that was not the easiest with this specific person. A lack of willingness to want to see where they went wrong. And then shifting over into the 8 and 9. And once we hit 9, things took a very serious turn very, very quickly. And I had just really, really gotten used to dating Chase, and he had changed careers and he was gone a lot. And so I remember I shouldn't even have to do this as a sponsor, but because of the type of person it was, I was trying to bend to that. And I remember saying, just so you're aware, Sunday is my day with Chase. Haven't seen him in a month, and I'm not even looking at my phone. I shouldn't even have to tell you that stuff. If I'm not available, I'm not available. But with her, I had to tell her that. And then Sunday night, I look at my phone for the first time. I have 7 missed calls and a bunch of text messages that her and her boyfriend just broke up. I told myself I would give him the entire day, and I did. And then I woke up the next morning not feeling well. I woke up late, raced to work. And then at like noon, I was like, oh yeah. So I like texted her. I said, hey, sorry, like I've been busy all day. Like I told you I was unavailable. And she was very, where were you? I needed you. And I'm like, I know what that's all about. And then
I remember you calling me and being like, well, I understand now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you remember this
Yes,
one.
I do.
Yeah. And so I told her that I would call her. And that was another one of my mistakes. I should have said, this is when I'm free. If you want to talk, call me. But I said I was available here. And then I think I left work early. I wasn't feeling well. And it slipped my mind. I was going to the meeting. And then I remember she texted me and she was like, thought you were going to call me. And I was like, oh, here we go. And I called her. And I have not been yelled at like that since my addiction days. This person was so angry with me, and it all stemmed down to lack of willingness to do the work, lack of accountability to see that they were the cause of a lot of their own failure, and flat out told me, you're a shitty sponsor, so I'm going to go relapse, and it's all your fault. Mm-hmm. And that's the first and only time someone's ever said that to me. And when I think back to it, like, it sucks. It sucks to think back, because like I have all of these defects, I have all this like shit, and to hear it from someone else, even though a part of you knows they're sick, a part of you knows that that's not true, but it was hard. It was hard to hear. And she's sitting there screaming at me, blaming. And I ended up calling. I talked to you, and I also did talk to my sponsor about it. And I remember him being like, "You handled that probably way better than I would have. Like, I'm actually really impressed with how you handled that." And I was shocked because like she's like sitting there screaming at me. And I just said, I'm like, look, I told you from the beginning, like I give respect and I get respect. And if you cannot have a conversation with me on the phone, then this conversation is going to end. Right? You're being pretty selfish. You're not even having a conversation with me. I can't make you relapse. This is on you. And I'm happy to talk to you about it, but not if you're going to be rude to me. She kept going. So I ended the phone call. And from that went 3 more calls that I didn't answer because I got to the meeting and at that point really needed it. A bunch of text messages telling me how horrible of a human I am and how everything is my fault. And now I can blame myself for not being a good enough sponsor. And then I think I just sent a quick message back and said, I wish you the best, but I do not condone and I will not put up with this kind of disrespectful behavior. And I blocked her from everything. And then you always have those people in your life who think they're helping, but I honestly would rather not even know, who catch something on social media and take a snapshot and send it and say, did you know this person's talking shit about you online? And I was like, you know what? Why do you think that I would actually want to, like, how is that helpful to me? But it was hard. It was hard watching somebody blast my name all over online. I'm sure you can relate and have been through that stuff too. Like, it was really, really hard. And I had to really I had to lean on my higher power hard for that. And it really had to come down to an acceptance that anyone who knows me knows that that's untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who believes it, I don't want at my table anyway. And it took a lot of prayer and a lot of meditation to finally accept that. So if you're struggling with someone who's treating you like shit, just let them go.
100%.
Let them go.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. Over 6 years, I can tell you. So I've had someone say, like, I met with this one individual one time a week. She wanted to get through the steps. She got to step 8. She tried to get a hold of me, a similar thing. Oh, you're not available. I'm like, I'm at a meeting. I'm just leaving. She was blowing up my phone. Like, and then she starts like calling me down. And I'm like, if you're going to continue to message me like this, I'm going to have to block you. I need some space. I asked for space a handful of times before. And then she didn't, so I had to block her. Then she starts messaging me on Instagram. I had to block her, like, and having those boundaries and remembering, like, we are dealing with sick people. Like, I'm a sick person too, like, but we have to have these boundaries too and not be a doormat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, one I was just talking to my sponsor about today, like, and my part in this one is people pleasing. Like, there's two situations where, like, people have been like, this one person was like, can you sponsor this girl? And I'm like, no, I'm full. And then her roommate messages me, can you sponsor my roommate? And I'm like, no. And then the girl messages me. I'm like, oh, this must be God. I'm like, oh, maybe I can help her. And it was just like, that ended up just, oh, like, things got twisted and this, like, it was a huge thing that like blew up. And it was like, and it was hard because I'm like, I felt like it attacked my integrity. And I'm like, that one sucked. And like, so then I thought I learned from that. But, you know,
we don't learn.
Character defects are like, you know, whack-a-moles. Like, you work on them and then they pop back up. And then, so there was this lady that I met like within the past year. And we, you know, like, so I have a business and like, I try and keep like my business and my recovery stuff separate. But sometimes they mix because a lot of people know me from recovery. And she was a client, and then she ended up asking me to sponsor her. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm sponsoring her. Things are going well. And then I end up doing like, but like, if I look back, I people pleased by saying yes, because like, yeah, I people pleased. And then so, you know, I end up sponsoring her. We end up sitting down one day. You know, we end up doing some of her step 4 or 5, and then she's supposed to come into my work for something, and it just ended up blowing up into this huge situation. And like, you know, it mixing like business and sponsorship has been something that now I won't do, because she's like, you should have known that, you know, when I bought this thing, I was high. I didn't even sponsor her then. Like, but all the blame, and then the drama, and then like publicly criticizing me, going to like my friends in recovery and being like, Alicia's drinking, Alicia's this, Alicia, you should be worried for her life. And it's like, I'm not. And I was stressed. I'm like, are people going to think these things? Even though I know I'm not doing those things, but it's like, it's easy to take that on. And like, you know, it's like having those boundaries and remembering like we are dealing with sick people. And sometimes we have to like, you know, we do have to pray. We have to have boundaries, and we can't take it on when other people aren't willing to, you know, take accountability for their own mishaps or their own things. Like, you know, but I think people play sometimes on that. Like, you know, if something doesn't work out, it's like, well, you didn't sponsor me well enough. It's like, no, you didn't do the work. Like, yeah. I'm not here to give you all the magical answers. Really, as a sponsor, we're not even there to give the answers. We're there to help someone figure out the answer themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's effective
by offering
sponsoring.
Relatable experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, like that's the best thing. And like, but yeah, I mean, there's lots of like trials and tribulations and like dealing with different people. Like with sponsoring. And I mean, it is really rewarding. It's super rewarding. But it can come with its challenges for sure.
Well, and I think that it's, something to kind of end that topic on is the importance of understanding that we're not talking about the hard experiences to deter someone from wanting to be a sponsor, right? Like anything in life, we don't grow unless God provides us weight to push through, right? And that I wouldn't trade every single bad experience I've ever had with a sponsee for all the good ones that I've got
100%.
being a sponsor.
And you learn so much from it, right?
So much. It's single-handedly the only reason I made it through year 2 because my steps were weak as fuck.
Right?
Weak. And only in sponsoring 10 to 15 people did I realize how weak it was because every time I did it, I was getting better. And it's just such an important, like, you want to learn how to grow quick. Try giving it away to other people.
100%.
Yeah. But I think one of the smartest things you ever taught me is, like, I help people through experiences, but I never try to have an answer that I don't have. I had a newer sponsee come to me the other day and say, I've never been through this and I don't know how to handle it. And so, somebody who has understanding, experience, and humility to be like, I have absolutely never been in that position. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea how to guide you on this. What I can tell you is I know 4 other single moms. They probably could help you. Do you have other people that you could ask about this specific thing? She was like, yeah, a few people. I said, okay, if that doesn't work out, let me know. I will connect you to people that have shared experience. But I never try to offer anything if I absolutely know nothing. Like, I won't do it. And I tell people too, like, when people come to me for like a direct thing, they're like, I did this, now this has happened, what should I do? And I say, like, I always say, I'm never going to tell you what to do. Because if I tell you what to do and it doesn't go well, I don't want that to be on me. I'm like, I can tell you that a similar situation happened to me. This is what I was taught. This is what I did. And this is the result that I got. I found it extremely helpful. Do with that information what you will.
Right? 100%. Yeah. Or like when people ask, like, what's your opinion on this? Or like, I'm like, my opinion really doesn't matter. Whatever this is, whether it's your relationship or you're breaking up and getting back together, even impersonally, I'm like, this might not be the best. In my head, I'm like, I have no opinion on it. Right. And us as sponsors, we're not supposed to have opinions on these things. We're just there to help someone, guide them through the book, guide them to their higher power, help them figure out the solution with the steps or their part. It doesn't matter what the fuck I think.
I think one of the coolest things that I learned about sponsorship is the importance of asking questions. Because you can help somebody get to their own answer by asking them questions. Don't offer them the answer. Ask them questions that'll help them get there.
100%. And like when I'm teaching, even like when I'm teaching courses with my business and stuff, it's like the girls will ask me questions and I'm like, well, here's some information. Like, what do you think about this? And like when they get it themselves, they remember it because they came to that answer themselves. Right.
I love that.
Instead of like just providing it, it's like, like if somebody just does your homework for you, you have the answer and you got through it. Maybe you got an A on the test, but like, what did you actually fucking learn? Really, you learned fucking nothing.
I love that. Huh. I like that. Well done. I'm trying to think. We've covered a lot. Can you think of anything else sponsorship related that we should talk about?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of different things. Yeah. Just the biggest thing is remembering you're not God.
Yes.
You don't have the ability to affect someone's life. You're just another addict who's got the answer before someone else. It's so important not to have a holier than thou attitude, right? Like, I can share quickly that, like, I did have a sponsor once who was like, you need to do this. You need to break up with this person. You need like this. And like, I never felt comfortable going back to that person, right? Like if somebody tells you what to do or acts better than, or like talks down to you, like it's ineffective. Like, so it's really important to humble yourself and remember, like, yeah, you're a sponsor, but like, you're only a sponsor because God got you there. It's not because you got yourself there.
Totally. Yeah. I love that. And I think that it's really important that people remember to like lean into these experiences and take, whether it's, having a sponsee or having a sponsor or being or whatever it is, lean into it and like learn everything you can. One of the biggest, most rewarding things I've come to understand is that God brings you people for the purpose of both of you learning probably a very different lesson at the same time. And I always tell new sponsees that have some fear about going out there and finding people and doing all this kind of work with others. And I'm just like, honestly, like, just don't try to be perfect. Like, you know nothing. You know just enough. You know just enough to help them, and that's what we're shooting for. That's what we're aiming for. But understand that God is going to bring you all of the people that you need to practice on. Like, God's not going to bring you a rock star right away. Maybe. Most likely, probably not. Right? God's going to bring you all the people that you need to practice and learn how to apply these skills and make the failures and do these things and become somebody moldable, so when a rock star comes, you're ready for them. Right? So enjoy the failures, enjoy making mistakes, right? Lean into that stuff. I just, like, it's so heartwarming and so hard to think about without crying. Like, thinking about the experiences that I've been through with you. And, like, I don't even know why I picked you. I didn't. I think God did. You were just there, and you were just like this. I just knew I needed to talk to you. And, like, I'm only where I am because of everything that you taught me. And I just love you. Like,
I'm so proud of you, and, like, coming here and, like, seeing the life that you live today, and, like, like, and really, like, I showed up, but God did all the work, right? And you showed up and you did all the work. Yeah, I would say the only other thing that popped into my head when you're talking was, like, one thing that my sponsor told me that's really important to keep is, like, that teacher-student dynamic. And once that switches, then that's also maybe a good time to kind of step away from that, because the sponsor is the teacher, right? Doesn't mean they're better than or worse than, but, like, we're there to guide, right? And when that kind of dynamic shifts, then that's the point to maybe consider some reflection.
That means you did good and you learned a lot,
right?
And it's time to move on and learn from somebody else. I love that. And I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks for being there for me.
Of course. Thanks.
Okay, I'm done with the tears. I think I'm good. Are you good?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I really hope that we can bring you back, because I know you had a couple topics in mind that you liked. So hopefully you can come back next season and we can chat about some more stuff.
Would love to.
Amazing. Thanks for coming.
Love you.
Peace.